I didn't say that to him. I do try to help. But some stuff.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to begin in 30 seconds. Please ensure your cell phones are off or on silent. Council members, ensure your microphones are turned on.
So if you ever decide to go to six, I'll let you know. Most people yeah, it must have changed. Yep.
All right, today is Monday, November 21st, 2022. It is a committee of the whole meeting for the Barberton City Council. Before we begin the committee of the whole meeting, we are going to start off with individual committee meetings this evening. And first up is street, sidewalk, and lighting with Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring to order the street, sidewalks, and lighting meeting. It is 6 o'clock. We're in council chambers. Members are present. I as chair, Mrs. Bailey, and Mr. Griffin. All council members are present along with guests as noted on my sheet. We have no legislation requested, and we have no pending legislation. So I can just open it up for miscellaneous. Anybody on the committee, do they have anything for miscellaneous? No? From council members? Yes, Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Ms. Angelo. How's the sidewalk program going?
Which sidewalk? The one that,
Downtown, they completing all of them so far? Or?
I have no idea. Mr. Teodosi?
Just give a quick update. The contractor is off to a good start. They focused on a lot of the Blitz area of downtown. We've had a lot of success. One-on-one meeting with businesses, explaining the opportunity of the program to handle a lot of what came out as violations during our Blitz. The work that's been done so far, we're trying not to tear too much out so that we don't leave too much open. With the availability of cement with some of our suppliers, so we're trying to, our contractors working hand in hand with the suppliers to make sure that we don't fall into a victim of the shortage and leave things opened up if the weather turns bad. We do have quite a few businesses that are still signed up, ready to go. On the residential side, we have a bunch. We're well in excess of conditions in that we do have reserved at this second time for this year's program. If we get some weather here good in the next couple weeks, we're going to head out in the next week or so and start that program and try and knock out as much of that as we possibly can this year.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And I want to just update the gas company that's been out in my ward. And they did pour concrete, they filled the big holes, they connected everything. They did the crosswalks, the ADA approach. So a couple weeks ago, they were out doing that. They, planted the grass and laid the straw and everything. So when you said sidewalks, I thought you were meaning the east side because I've been seeing, the trucks down there and the cement trucks and everything. So that, I believe that on that side of town is just about done, so.
They're doing a good job directing traffic too. Like I go that way. all
Oh,
the
yeah,
time.
yeah, they do. It was a
good
bit
job.
crazy, but I didn't really have any complaints or anything. They were, getting all new gas lines, so. Anything else from the body? From the audience, Mr. Best? No?
Can I-
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to ask where they're doing the gas lines in Ward 2.
Well, they were doing on Robinson Avenue and Baird and Ford and Tusk. I don't know how far down they
Okay.
went Park.
That's
Yeah.
fine. I just wanted to have a general idea.
Yeah.
They had marked in front of our property, but they ended up not
Mhm.
coming, so.
Not yet. Yeah, I don't think, they're not all the way down,
Okay.
with the east side. I think they were, kind of focusing on maybe 7th Street, 8th Street, and then down that section, and then they'll move on, so.
Okay.
But, Yeah, they were very conscious working, and they did a good job. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Mrs. Bailey, do I have a second?
I second.
Mr. Griffin, and we are adjourned at 6:07 PM. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Angela. Next up is Environmental Health and Social Services with Mrs. Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call to order the Committee of Environmental Health and Social Services. It is November 21st, 6:07 PM. We are in council chambers. All members are present, which is myself, Mr. Jaber, and Mrs. Angeloff. All other members of council are present, and all others are as noted on my sheet. We have no new topics for requested legislation. So I would like to open that up for miscellaneous discussion. None? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that, ma'am.
We are adjourned at 6:07 PM.
Thank you, Mrs. Bailey. Planning, Annexation, and Codes with Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call the Planning, Annexation, and Codes Committee meeting to order. It is Monday, November 21st, 2022, 6:08 PM here in council chambers. All members of the committee are present, which includes myself as chair, Mrs. Angela, Mr. Jaber, and President Greer. All other council members are present as well, and guests will be noted on my sheet. We have one new request for legislation, a letter from Stacy Carr, strategic planner, requesting legislation to allow the finance director to appropriate a total of $9,250 from the city's unappropriated general fund to the planning department's operation and maintenance fund for the demolition of 303 East Castle Avenue in Barberton. Emergency wording is requested, and this will be referred to finance. Are there any questions about this piece of legislation?
Thank you, Chair. Is the funds typically appropriated from the general fund to the planning department for demolitions?
It's a good
I can answer
question.
that.
Okay.
Any bank-owned property pays a $10,000 bond, and that makes a determination if they're going to fix it up and resell it or not. In this case, they are not going to fix it up, so we're going to tear it down using that $10,000 bond that they applied for. So that's in a special account, so it has to come out of that account, put in general fund so we can spend the money.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for that info, Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. To head to Councilor Angeloff in Finance tonight, it will be coming from the trust fund's cash balance to the city's general fund. Will be a piece of legislation.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Yeah, can I have a motion to
make a
call this?
motion.
Thank you. In a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, I will go ahead and open it up for miscellaneous discussion for planning. Anything? Okay, anything from the gallery? All right, hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that, ma'am.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 6:10.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Next up is Finance and Personnel with Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance Personnel, it is Monday, November 21st, 2022. It is 6:11. The committee consisting of Councilors Coburn, Thompson, President Greer, with myself as chair is present. All else noted. Buckle in, everybody. We got a long one here. First one, letter from Stacy Carr, strategic planner, requesting legislation to allow the finance director to transfer $9,250 from the trust fund's cash balance to the city of Barberton's general fund. Emergency wording requested. This is the money that's going to be in the next letter that is referred to planning. Are there any questions on this? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Next is what is referred from planning. A letter from Stacy Carr, strategic planner, requesting legislation to allow the finance director to appropriate a total of $9,250 from the city's unappropriated general fund to the planning department's operation and maintenance fund for the demolition of 303 East Castle Avenue. Emergency wording requested. Are there any comments that Councilor Thompson didn't answer? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor? Aye. Next, a letter from Todd Shreve, Director of Public Service, requesting legislation authorizing payment to Everbridge, Inc. for the 2023 Nixle contract in the amount of $5,400.91 with emergency wording requested. Been using Nixle for quite some time. Are there any questions on this?
I have none.
None? None? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Next, a letter from Jamie Eisman, Director of Public Safety and Human Resources, requesting legislation to enter into contract with MetLife for employee dental and vision coverage. Emergency wording is requested. Director, I believe you said this expires at the end of the year?
The current dental and vision that we have, yes, with medical mutual does. So we're entering into a new contract January 1, with MetLife.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
This is a
Counselor?
yearly thing that we normally do, correct?
Yes.
Any others? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Next, a letter from Lisa Kolish Miller, Law Director, requesting legislation to appropriate $25,000 from the unappropriated item of the general fund to the Law Department's operation maintenance budget of the general fund. Emergency wording and one reading requested. Did everybody get the letter for that? Are there any questions on that letter? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Next is a letter from Todd Shreve, Director of Public Service, requesting legislation authorizing payment to Cardinal Maintenance and Service Company for monthly cleaning invoice in the amount of $3,700.60. Emergency wording requested. Pretty self-explanatory. Any questions on the cleaning bill? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Next is a letter from Todd Shreve, Director of Public Service, requesting legislation that transfers $680,000 from the unappropriated item of the water fund to the capital budget of the water fund. Emergency wording and one reading is requested. This is for replacement of water lines located inside the limits of AMAT's ODOT project. Road resurfacing project is 80/20, with the city responsible for 100% of the water line improvement. Water line improvement also includes new valves, fire hydrants throughout the project. Are there any questions here? Counselor?
What project? Or projects, the ones that we just finished up, State Street?
The PID 108370.
Okay, the Worcester State intersection.
Any other comments, questions? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Next is a letter from Jeremy Flaker, Finance Director, requesting legislation to transfer $80,000 from the Income Tax Fund to the Internal Cost Allocation Fund. Emergency wording requested. Director Flaker has gone over this quite a few times, that this would be coming for the internal costs, gas, all that. Am I correct, Director?
Yeah, it's due to the rising fuel costs. We need a little bit more money in there to get us through the end of the year to cover fuel, so that's what it's for.
Thank you. Any questions? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor? Aye. Next, a letter from Jeremy Flaker, Finance Director, requesting legislation to appropriate $80,000 from the unappropriated item of the Internal Cost Fund to the Operation and Maintenance Budget of the Internal Cost and Allocation Fund, necessary to get us through the rest of the year with fuel. Emergency wording requested. Just pretty much went over that, so anybody think of any other questions?
I'll
Right.
make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Letter from Jeremy Flaker, Finance Director, requesting legislation to transfer $30,000 from the Income Tax Fund to the Sports Complex Fund. Emergency wording, one reading requested. It's been, according to the letter, it's been negative past few months, and due to projected revenues from leagues and tournaments not coming as expected. Are there any questions on this one? Director, in the upcoming budget, do you anticipate another shortfall next year, or?
I'll have to get with Mr. Patterson, Parks Director, and check with him. See if, I mean, it was his first year doing the budget this past year, so he was still getting the hang of like what leagues and tournaments that they were gonna bring in. So we more than likely have a better understanding of where those numbers are, so we can budget appropriately for this coming year.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor? Aye. Excuse me a moment. Letter from Todd Shreve, Director of Public Service, requesting legislation authorizing to participate in the Community University Education Council of Governments. Membership includes cooperative purchasing of supplies, services, equipment, and certain materials. QCOG was formerly known as Q, and Barberton has been a member since 1990. Emergency wording requested. Are there any questions here? The organization for 30 years has just changed names, kind of consolidated, and looking to stay in it. Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. To the committee, any miscellaneous discussion?
I have nothing.
To the body? To the gallery? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 6:19.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. That concludes our individual committee meetings for this evening. We'll take a 5-minute break and begin the committee of the whole.
Since
I moved the camera,
Yeah.
now we can see everybody's face, but you have to keep yours down.
Oh, okay, no worries.
As long as the meeting is on.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but now everybody knows.
Yeah, I just noticed.
I used to always have that before the camera there.
I know. What's that? So like I said, I'm being obnoxious. Bright orange
Oh.
obnoxious enough.
Yes. The thing is leaving, so you gotta be careful.
You know, I don't move tonight, I'll move it. I just have it there.
Buy some tickets.
It's a nice camera though, too. Very voice.
The voices are coming from somewhere else with you.
Oh, really? It's not coming from the same camera? Where's the voice coming out of then? Before they had this little recorder, you know, you guys use that anymore?
Good idea. Instead of you guys, you already buy one. Pass it around and everything. It's up underneath the speaker.
Oh, nice. It picks up very good.
I'm gonna be on slow
And then
motion
when
the
I
rest of
get
the
back to
day.
the office,
I wasn't.
I load the one recording into the computer. And then I
You know, we
have
went down
software
to
that I
very
break it down into each.
I went to bed like 4:11
So it's all just
on
The
Saturday.
beginning is, I would like to call this meeting to order, and then it is Justin going, thank you, Mr. and Mrs.
Yeah.
It's just easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
And at the time, nobody wanted to turn on.
and I, the day before, we did travel.
That's awesome.
That's what I wanted to say. That was the only reason.
Yeah.
This way everybody can see.
Right. Teamwork, we got this, we got this.
That was the, yeah, but, and so it's fixed. I was gonna tell you. Once they close this one for the work. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We have a request in. That was, come out and look back down.
What else, Mr. Griffin? It slows down with the winter time. We're already just up.
And the whole idea is to have it mounted.
Got a couple houses, a couple people moved.
Yeah, that were trouble.
Yeah.
You send the landlord. Thank you. Just want to break the ice with my number in the car if you need it.
The house is bigger. They're gonna flip it, of course.
Hopefully, you think it was the runners. I always try to keep new.
Yeah, we couldn't tap into that
I
one.
know that the house is in the problem. I sent a letter to the landlord, but I'm doing this with you. She can, but your tenants will go and look at it.
How do you find out?
You go to some kind of auditor's office.
Okay, we'll find out.
Yeah, I usually send the same letter. With my business card, and I send it to them.
I think so. It was, when we got the grant money,
Yeah.
they had to print it.
Send a letter, say, hey, thank you, blah, blah, blah. And I say,
But that's not ours.
we're looking to new tenants. Throw a check, throw a check to it. Just trying to keep the community. The tenants there for a long time. Helps out. Some of them listen, some of them in California, some in Texas, and everything. It's good.
He's been here the whole time.
More and more.
I didn't see her when I was checking on her.
From my office? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, you just dropped off.
I wasn't gonna be here Thursday, but we have to go. We could've did it on Thursday. Or Wednesday.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. And I didn't get to go.
Friday.
I was in Columbus.
Tuesday, Wednesday, that way I come on Thursday.
You ever get tires for your car?
Yes, I went back to Manchester Road.
Okay.
States,
They do a good deal?
Patch behind.
same as before.
They put them on everything?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's just bringing you stuff today.
Well, I knew what one was already, but one of the, behind it, so
Tires going
that
up.
the ride didn't stay
I did
there.
find some cheaper at National Tire and Battery.
Yeah, she was a big.
Who was it, so I could crack on?
And I missed it. And I have this thing, I have this NFHS, if you ever heard of it. And you remember, and you can get on, you can
That's
stream
good. How many,
it. And, so we went to various.
that's actually more than.
So I said, oh, I can get the games. So we set everything
You probably
up,
got Coopers?
kept saying
I got
technically
Cooper,
this,
Solaris,
and we never got
They
to
did a
see
good job,
it.
Cooper.
So I don't know who does how does.
Thing is, in the wintertime, you need it.
Oh,
In
God.
Ohio.
Heather sent me the little thing.
That's the SUV. I drive it
We really missed it, yeah. However,
four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put the tires on
yeah,
it, so-
I'm
When is this,
looking,
next year?
Came and
Spring?
watched them.
Oh, did they?
Come down to Casey here
So, when they start working,
for tomorrow.
You got something to start.
I'm so
You
excited,
got
but I'm
the
sad
children
too,
on keep
because
them
it's,
for you or
you
keep them outside?
know,
Keep them outside there and teach you for you. So you don't have to walk one time.
No, I just put them in the freezer.
well,
It's up to you.
You're gonna have to
Keep
fight
them outside, it's up
street
to you.
department.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
that's what added,
well, when that boss takes them.
yeah.
How bad? They don't got enough now.
yeah.
It's not my fault. I'm not a loud talker, okay? You act like I was screaming into the microphone.
The next morning's I had to work Thursday, so Friday morning.
She's so quiet, isn't she? Yeah.
They were just kind of figuring that out, though.
Okay.
I didn't have my mic. What? About being quiet? Yeah.
I turned it up and now
Yeah.
she did. I was, Robin's working right now.
Yeah, she is,
She never talks, so, yeah.
she's very smart. And she's like kind of OCD.
But that
like
makes sense that you had
project.
both.
Whatever.
Way
Then you
ahead.
had-
Whatever. I know you've said it 8 times and I was loud. I get it.
Content.
Forceful. You're not loud, you're forceful.
Right. That's exactly what I'm saying. And now this is like the 80th time. Yep.
What's wrong?
Yep. There we go.
Look at you,
Erica.
you're on it today.
Look at her. Did you notice? Oh yeah, she matches you. That's very weird.
Yeah, all 3 of us.
Oh my god.
Got that animal.
You all match.
Oh, there you go, guys.
I didn't wear mine tonight.
We're styling. Oh, you match too. You match their, yeah, even shorter matches.
All right, we're going to begin. Just a reminder, cell phones are on off or silent. And council, make sure your microphones are on. All right, today is Monday, November 21st, 2022. This is a committee of the whole meeting for Barberton City Council. I call this meeting to order at 6:28 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Citizens addressing council. There has to be something there. I must have missed the inside joke there. Thank you, Mrs. Angela. Individual community, or the committee reports. So we are going to start with street, sidewalk, and lighting with Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. Street, sidewalk, and lighting met this evening at 6 p.m. All members of the committee were present, all council members were present, and guests as noted on my sheet. We had no new requests for legislation, no pending legislation, and with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mrs. Angela. Planning, annexation, and codes. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning, Annexation, and Codes met this evening here in council chambers at 6:08 p.m. All members of the committee were present, and other guests are noted on my sheet. We had one new request for legislation, a letter from Stacy Carr, strategic planner, requesting legislation to allow the finance director to appropriate a total of $9,250 from the city's unappropriated general fund to the planning department's operation and maintenance fund for the demolition of 303 East Castle. Emergency wording is requested, and this was referred to finance. We had no miscellaneous discussion, and we adjourned at 6:10. With that, I will pass.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. City Utilities with Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Utilities met last week. We had voted on all pending legislation, and we have nothing new to report. With that, I pass.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. Public Welfare and Safety, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Public Welfare and Safety met last week, November 14th, 2022. All members were present, as well as all other council members and guests as noted on my sheet. We had no new requests for legislation. However, we did vote on ordinance number 152, 2022, which is Chapter 351 parking generally. And we made some amendments to make it more clear what vehicles are not allowed to be parked on the street. There was one mention in miscellaneous discussion, it was from Mr. Jaber, and he was asking the rest of council if they have been getting speeding complaints, and he has had 3. There was no other discussion, and we adjourned at 6:11 PM, and with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry. Rules, Marketing, and Development, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rules, Marketing, and Development met on November 14th. All members present and all other guests is noted. We had no requests for legislation to call for. Miscellaneous discussion, we did discuss Council Rule 305B on appointments and vacancies to boards and commissions. We adjourn at 6:23. With that, I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Environmental Health and Social Services, Mrs. Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Environmental Health and Social Services met this evening in council chambers. All members were present, all council members were present, and all others is noted. There was no requested legislation, no miscellaneous discussion. We adjourned at 6:07, and with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mrs. Bailey. City Properties, Parks and Recreation, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Properties Park Recreation met November 14th at 6:01 PM in council chambers. All members were present. Our council members also were present and noted. We had 2 new guests that day, Renee and Chris Macco. And we had 1 requested legislation, a letter from Don Patterson, Director of Parks and Recreation, requesting legislation to enter a contract with Perrin Asphalt and Concrete for $38,500 in ARPA funds. This was to tear out the existing installation of new tennis courts in Barberton. Emergency wording was requested. We invoked 702 to suspend 302. And this is a price locked in for the spring. And it was an additional $2,000 in materials for prices. And we had no miscellaneous discussion. And we adjourned, sir, at 6:09. That pass.
Thank you, Mr. Jaber. Finance and Personnel, Mr. Heddick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance personnel is calling for the following. A transfer of $9,250 from the trust fund cash balance to the City of Barberton's general fund with emergency wording. Legislation to allow the finance director to appropriate the $9,250 from the city's unappropriated general fund to the planning department's operation and maintenance fund for demolition of 303 East Castle with emergency wording. Legislation authorizing payment to Everbridge, Inc. for the 2023 Nixle contract in the amount of $5,400.91. Emergency wording requested. Legislation to enter into contract with MetLife for employee dental and vision coverage. Emergency wording requested. Legislation to appropriate $25,000 from the unappropriated item of the general fund to the law department's operation and maintenance budget of the general fund. Emergency wording requested. Legislation authorizing payment to Cardinal Maintenance and Service Company, Inc. for monthly cleaning invoice in the amount of $3,700.60. Emergency wording requested. Legislation to transfer $680,000 from the unappropriated item of the water fund to the capital budget of the water fund. Emergency wording requested. Legislation to transfer $80,000 from the income tax fund to the internal cost allocation fund. Emergency wording requested. Legislation to appropriate $80,000 from the unappropriated item of the internal cost allocation fund to the operation and maintenance budget of the internal cost and allocation fund. Emergency wording requested. Legislation to transfer $30,000 from the income tax fund to the sports complex fund. Emergency wording requested. And legislation authorizing the Director Public Service Todd Shreve to participate in the Community University Education Council of Governments. Emergency wording is requested. With that, finance passes.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. That concludes our committee reports for this evening. I have one thing. We were short. Sorry, what was that? We were short just a couple council members for our first work session on the 17th. Council then is determining dates, and we'd like to do this quarterly. So We'll do it quarterly, dates are to be determined at this time. We're trying to coordinate with the mayor so we can have more work sessions. And I don't have anything else. Is there anything from the body?
Can I ask, because I had to leave during
Ms.
the
Smith?
end of the work session, is it gonna be tacked onto a meeting, or is it gonna be another separate meeting?
We're exploring the
Okay.
possibilities of most likely doing them on a committee of the whole nights.
Okay.
So we know that they're not crazy long, but the option, I know some council members are not able to make it. Some days are better, so we don't know that yet. So we are looking at possibly doing it at the end of council, or committee of the wholes.
Okay.
Is it, Mr. Jaber?
Thank you, Mr. President. I spoke to the owner of Precision Concrete today. They did pour the concrete for the McCaffrey basketball court last week. They're supposed to put the hoops in maybe tomorrow, depends on the weather. But there will be no lines on the basketball court, so if you want to be a Steve Curry or Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, this is your chance to say this is a three-pointer, no lines. So, but he did good work. It looks awesome, looks clean, and that's it.
Anything else from the body? Department heads? No. All right. Mayor's report, is anybody got anything for him? All right. Well, with nothing else, this meeting is adjourned at 6:37 PM.